The following program contains a topic which may not be suitable for young viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hi there, welcome to Cannabis Conversations, a weekly program that is designed to cure the many curiosities, clear up some of that misinformation, and with any luck at all, fill in the blanks to missing information. I'm your host, Green Irene. I'm a cannabis author, educator, a coach, and consultant. Joining me again today in the studio is my friend Jason Chatelaine, and he's here to talk about ingestion, about medibles and edibles, and the difference between raw and decarboxylated.
Perfect.
Hi, Jay. Thank you
you
so much for being here.
Thanks for having me again.
Do you know, last week I had Ashley Michaud from elementalgrowth.org on the show, and we talked about raw cannabis as a superfood.
It is,
because those of us who have studied it know that it is, and adding it and incorporating it into our diet raw is not going to produce any sort of psychotropic euphoria or high, as most people know it to be.
That's correct.
But we want to talk about medibles today. We want to talk about having infusions into our food. Now, before we get started, it might be a good idea for the audience who isn't familiar with you or who you are, your background. You might like to introduce yourself. And
my name's Jason Chatelaine. I'm an endocannabinoid specialist. I actually work with a company called Giggle Sticks. We do medibles. We also do edibles also, so they're recreational, plus they are for medicine at the same time. I sit on the board with the Ministry of Medical Marijuana, and I do work with the Canadian Cannabis Control Board. So I do have a fairly large background in the cannabis industry, and I'm also a medical patient myself.
Well, yes, and you have an exponential amount of information. You're just a wealth of resources, and there's so many subjects that we could talk on. But today we're going to focus on the ingestion, on the method of consumption known as ingestion, and the difference between edible and medible. Let's start first with the basics, though. We talked raw cannabis last week. This week, I want to talk about activating that cannabis. It's a term called decarboxylation.
Thank you for saying it. Decarboxing for short, we call it decarboxing. So, basically taking off the carboxyl acid from the THC. THC is formed with the THCA and CBDA molecule, and by heating it, and this is where we're going with it, we heat it up to a certain degree. When you inhale it, it can be heated up, depending if you're vaporing it or if you're smoking it, it can be heated up to 800 degrees Celsius, where when you're making an medible, you're only heating it up to around 150 or 140 degrees.
Okay, and we're going to get into the details of that. So basically what it is when the plant is growing, it naturally produces cannabinoids, but they are in their acidic form, like THCA, CBDA, as you said, or euphoric, I should say. You know, and the reason for that is the shape of the molecule. With that acidic arm on the molecule, it's not going to fit into the CB1 receptors in the brain.
That's correct.
That arm, acidic arm, has to be taken off. Now, heat is one way of doing it. Another method is through ice or flash freezing. We can remove those molecules. We've talked a little bit on the show about growing and the different things to look for on your plant when you're growing, like that sugary stuff, and then the trichomes. Trichomes. That's the proper terminology. I had one fella and he kept calling it trikes. I had no idea.
That's right, short form.
So trichomes, and this is what contains all of the cannabinoids that are produced in the plant. It literally sweats them out to the surface.
That's right.
They come up in a little V-like thing with the little ball on the end. They look like little mushrooms. And that contains all of the oils and such. And that's what we want to take off of the plant in a concentrate, correct?
That's right,
Okay, so what are some of the ways, and what are some of the, are there different effects? So if you take it off in, say, freezing, by freezing these molecules off, the acidic arm off, we've activated our cannabis now.
That's right,
Does that produce a different euphoria than if we heated it?
You know what? To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure when you say freezing it to me. I've only had it where I've heated it to a certain degree. With freezing it, I personally haven't heard of freeze. I know that you can take the trichomes off by freezing it, right? But then whether or not the acid molecule is actually taking off until it's heated, I'm not sure of that. So that's something that I'd have to either look into, or if you know more than I do in that case, I'm not sure.
Well, the reason I asked you the question was I wasn't sure if there would be a different euphoria. No. I don't think there would be, though. I mean, logically speaking, whatever cannabinoids are in that trichome, that's what we're going to achieve. Yeah,
but what you were mentioning too about raw cannabis too, and saying that the cannabinoids are on the trichomes, for example. There are cannabinoids that are still inside the plant too, and that's why people get such a great benefit from eating raw cannabis. My wife is a major eater of raw cannabis. We juice raw cannabis all the time. The idea behind it is she likes the fact that the acid molecule is still on it, so she can actually function without having the euphoric or the high feeling, right? So
and still get all of the health and wellness benefits. Major benefits,
sometimes more benefits than the actual gleaning of the actual THC trichomes from them and taking the A off. So
well, certainly. I mean, we need there are essential acids that we need. That the cannabis seed. The hemp seed contains all of the nutritional value essential to the human development.
That's right, yeah.
So, and I mean,
we pretty much don't need to eat anything else. You're right.
Well, except we'd all be very fat because it is exceptionally high in fats.
But good fats, though, too.
Yes, but I think it's missing that one ingredient that starts with an L that converts the fat into proteins and muscle material or some such thing. So it gives us everything we need, but it's up to us to do what we have to.
That's right.
All right, before we get too carried away with the raw, because we did discuss it already, let's talk a little bit about when we're infusing a decarboxylated, or I'm just going to stick with the term activated.
Okay, perfect. Yeah,
the cannabis has been activated.
That's
that acidic arm has
been... Through decarboxylation, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so we've done that. Now, what are some of the preferred, and I know I can ask you this in your experience, what have you learned, patients, I'm not discussing from a recreational perspective, but patients, what is their preferred method of consumption?
Well, some patients don't like the taste of the cannabis. When you infuse it into a cookie, for example, or into our giggle stick lollipops that we had, at first when we first started them, someone put it in their mouth and it would taste like grass, like almost like you were eating grass, and they were like, you know, it's a lollipop, it's supposed to taste good, right? So when you're using certain activated products to infuse your medibles, it really depends on the preference of the person who's eating it. So some of my patients, for example, they would only take activated concentrated oil in a cap. So it would be a swallowing so that they didn't have to taste that, right? Whereas some people, they love the taste of the cookies that we make, even though we use a concentrated oil. And by being a concentrated oil, you don't get that super taste to, because what happens with butter, when you make your butter, you have to add, say if it says a cup of butter for your cookies, right? You add a cup of that butter. So now you've got a full cup of that butter. But if it said a cup of butter and you only added, say, 1,000 milligrams of concentrated oil, now all of a sudden it's spread out more into the cookies where you're not tasting it as much, but you're getting just the same amount of medicine from it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, that makes all the sense in the world. In addition to that, we can also use an infused butter.
Absolutely.
And we'll get to the details of that. But we can actually use an infused butter instead of adding the oil. And we're going to get into the details of different types of concentrates, because there are a lot of them. There's rosin, there's hash, there's crystal.
CO2.
There's, and then the methods of these extractions are just phenomenal.
The distillants that they have,
Right. So now, if people are preferring it, as you're saying, what you were saying about the cap full of oil, I've seen this being done actually in Ohio in a couple of the nursing homes, where the patients, they're not able to chew their food or ingest their food accurately. They don't like the taste. It's very difficult if you've ever dealt with...
I love it myself personally.
There you go.
Do,
See, and me me, it depends on the strain and how it's been rendered. That makes a huge difference.
Absolutely.
Removing, when we create a concentrate, we can remove just through levels of heat, we can remove certain flavonoids.
That's correct.
Flavonoids is what gives it the flavor.
The distilling I was telling you about earlier, they can remove all the flavoring out of it altogether, and they can actually add in strawberry or add in the flavonoids from cauliflower, if anything they wanted to. Exactly, right? So, which kind of scares me in a sense too, because when you bring it to that type of science for people who don't really have the education to run that type of machine, you kind of wonder, you know, they're putting in, like you said, mango or pineapple. Is that really doing, you know, the right thing to the medicine, right? And
is this doing us any justice as humans? I mean, are we adding more chemicals to our food? Now are we adding chemicals to our medicine? And I mean, especially as patient advocates, we've been screaming forever, whole plant, absolutely essential, keep the pharmacists out of it, no offense.
That's right.
But let's keep the chemical constituency away from it. Let's stick with whole health naturalism.
And the flavonoid's important, like you said, for the smells and even the taste of it. But if you look at it, I have so many medical patients that buy from licensed producers, and they would say to me, Jay, you know, here, open this can up. This can is, they call it, let's say, black tuna, and this can is called sour diesel, and this can is called, and it's all in the different medicine cans, and they say, smell each one for me, Jay, and I'd smell each one. He says, what do you notice on all three of them? And I'd say, they smell good, and he'd say, but don't they all smell the same? And they do, because what happens is before they can send it out to us, they have to put it through a process to actually, and this is something that, you know, has to have more research done to it. They could be killing the good compounds. They say it's 28% THC at the growth of it when they lab test it, but by the time it gets to my door, who knows what type of THC or which value of THC is in it.
Well, that's right. And drying and curing your cannabis, you know, if you're growing your own, then you'll know that there is a definite methodology to drying your cannabis and curing it to release all of the flavonoids and the terpenes. The terpenes are what makes it
is what I was looking for, exactly.
You know,
Thank you.
When they all smell the same, it's an indication that it's been dried too quickly or not cured effectively. Jay, on that note, I'm going to ask you to hold on a minute. We're going to cut to break. When we return, we're going to talk about these concentrates in a lot more detail and how to get them into your food at home. Stay tuned.
The following program contains a topic which may not be suitable for young viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to Cannabis Conversations. I'm Green Irene, and joining me today is Jason Chatelaine, a cannabis enthusiast and patient advocate with a wealth of experience and an exponential amount of information with respect to ingestions and concentrates and how to make these. Before the break, we talked a little bit about the difference between raw and activated cannabis. We talked a little bit about the differences between edibles and medibles. Now, these are terms that are thrown around an awful lot, and we'll get to the details on those, I guess, sort of throughout the conversation. But why don't we just jump right in and let's, as of October 17th, Canadians coast to coast are going to be able to purchase cannabis, grow cannabis, consume cannabis, but the only legal retail product is going to be herb or oil.
Watered down oil.
Watered down oil.
That's right.
The carrier solutions for that oil is very scary. That's something to definitely ask if you have any sort of food sensitivities. I myself learned the hard way that one of our LPs uses a carrier solution such as palm kernel oil. Some use soy oil, can't say that, soy
Soy, yeah.
Thanks, soy oil as a carrier solution. Others use coconut oil. All of these different things, that's what's carrying your cannabinoids.
That's
when
right.
we use those oils sublingually, and sublingual is entirely different than ingestion.
It's right under the tongue.
Yeah, and the reason for that, I guess there's like it's the fastest route to the brain. Or to the heart and then to the brain, right?
That's right, yeah.
So, and it's in our mouths.
That's right, under your tongue.
So, and so that's why sublingual is a lot more like inhalation. The effects of it is a lot more. It is pretty much immediate. It's not as long-lasting as ingestion. As we talked about before the break, we said ingestion is, well, we didn't actually. Why don't we talk about what happens when we ingest THC?
Yeah, well, the difference between ingesting, you just mentioned that when you put it under your tongue or if you inhale, the effects come about within a minute. 30 seconds to maybe even 2 minutes, you'll start to feel the effects of the THC and the CBD, depending on what strain you're inhaling.
Right.
With ingestion, what happens is that it goes into your system and it metastasizes through your liver, which at that point takes about, I would say, 35 to 45 minutes, depending on what you are ingesting too.
And depending on your metabolism, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, depending
on, if you digest very slowly, it could take significantly longer. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
Some of the lollipops that gigglesticks.ca makes, they take approximately 45 minutes because it takes you about 15 minutes to actually eat the lollipop. If we find if we dip it in our coffee, it only takes about 25 minutes to do that, right? Okay. And we also have gummies, right? People like gummies. The gummies only take about 20 minutes because, again, it probably goes under your tongue somewhat when you're swallowing it, right? So it acts faster, right? So, but it also lasts longer too. So I've said to some patients that I've talked to that, if they need immediate relief, right, in inhalation, or I don't like to say inhalation, I like to say vaporation, right? So because it's much more healthy for you than smoking, right? So when you vaporize it, it will be almost immediately within 30 to 60 seconds, where when you ingest it, it could take anywhere from, like I said, 20 minutes to even to an hour and a half even, right? So, but the effects last a lot longer.
And they're significantly stronger too.
Definitely.
We were discussing this just before the show.
Right.
In that delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol.
Thank you for saying it.
So delta-9 THC, which is what we're all familiar with through the inhalation methods of consumption.
Right.
Everybody knows THC gets you high or produces that psychotropic euphoria. When we ingest, that THC is actually metabolized in our liver into a different type of tetrahydrocannabinol.
That's right, 11.
Known as 11-hydroxy tetrahydrocannabinol.
Oh, that's right, yeah. My favorite number. My favorite number, 11.
And this takes a so this is a much slower effect through our system. It's an all-over effect.
Much stronger.
Much stronger and significantly longer lasting. So the psychotropic effects are significantly higher. And it lasts longer.
Yeah, and the pain reduction is a lot longer. It lasts longer for you, right? So
this is part of the reason I think patients especially have gone to medibles.
Yes.
We can get through an entire day. Someone who has chronic pain, chronic fatigue, chronic aches, where you wake up crying in the morning and you've got a full day ahead of you of activity. Ingesting at specific intervals the strains and dosages. I really want to talk about that because a lot of us as patients have difficulty with that. So being able to do that throughout the day, we're able to take a dose in the morning of an infused medibal, maybe one in the afternoon, and a different one in the evening perhaps. But that gives us the long-lasting effect over the course of the day. So now let's talk about dosing some of those medibles. This is a very challenging concerted effort.
It is. With the government making it so that there are no actual labs that you can bring your product to get lab tested unless you're a licensed producer. I was fortunate enough to work with a licensed producer, so I'd had in with lab Eurofins. I maybe shouldn't have mentioned the name, but he's a good friend of mine. So he lab tested our concentrates so that they could let us know that there was no THCA in it, and because they were going straight for medibles or edibles, right?
Right.
And there was no CBDA, and so there was an activated THC that was being put into our product, right? What happens is that you can't really test to see how much product you're actually putting into each one. So like you were saying, slow and low, or low and slow, right? If you take an edible that, let's say, says 300 milligrams of THC in it, you really don't know if that has 300 milligrams of pure THC, or if it's 10% THC or 20% THC. So you may be able to buy a chocolate bar that you eat half of it and your back pain goes away, but the next day you go into that same place, you buy a chocolate bar from the same dispensary or the same licensed producer, you eat half of it, and all of a sudden by the time you get to your home, you can't feel your legs anymore. So there's a huge discrepancy in the dosage part of it, right? So
and why is that?
It's because of non-lab testing, for one, right? Mm-hmm. So the person doesn't know. If for example, with Giggle Sticks, what we do is we have ours lab tested. So I'll give you an example. I was out in BC. We have a lot of patients from Tofino Beach to Newfoundland. Right. But we were out in BC, and we had a lady that was working behind the counter at a legal dispensary, and she says to me, she says, I need to eat 1,800 milligrams of pure THC every day to battle my Crohn's, the pain that I get from Crohn's. And I said to her, if you ate 1,800 milligrams of THC every day, I wouldn't have got to meet you today, for one, because you'd probably be in your bed, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah,
and for a few days at that matter, right?
That's
because
great.
I don't know if your audience, your audience knows, but 1,000 milligrams of oil or a concentrate is about that size. If she was to eat even that size, some of my cancer patients I have eat that size, and because of the pain that they're in, they can tolerate it somewhat, and they have to build their way up to a full 1,000 milligrams, right?
And that's a pretty intense cancer treatment.
That is a huge. That is
we're going to knock cancer right the heck out of the park.
That's right.
This is our last ditch effort. But yeah, that's extremely high dosage.
Yeah, 1,800 milligrams. Unfortunately, I said, well, what exactly do you eat? And she says, well, I have 3 of these chocolate bars. They're 300 milligrams each. I have a piece of this cake. It's 500 milligrams, right? And I said to her, I said, it's 500 milligrams of what? And she's like, of THC. And she believes it's pure THC. What happens is, I said, well, if they made that cake with just big fan leaves, then it's not going to be, I could say it like this, like I was earlier, a can of beer is 355 milliliters of beer. Yeah. Now, it says at the bottom, 5% alcohol. Is it 5% alcohol, or is it 40% alcohol? You're still getting 355 milliliters, or she's getting 300 milliliters of THC, but what kind of THC? And that's why when we labeled the Giggle Sticks, it was, and some people say, well, these don't do much for me because they're only 50 milliliters at 67% THC, and that's a large dose, you know what I mean?
It's a very large dose.
A very large dose, right?
Reading the labels is absolutely essential for anything you're doing. I mean, even going to the grocery store, read your labels.
Exactly.
I was shocked to find that Colgate tells us, do not swallow. If you do, call the Poison Control Center.
That's because the
blew
fluoride.
Me away.
That's right. I don't eat fluoride anymore.
So coming back, so reading your labels, understanding your labels, and I think this is part of the reason why our government has simply said, you know what, we're not putting edibles, we're not putting topicals, we're not allowing anything beyond bud, which is the flower of the cannabis, and oils. Now, I don't know how they're going to put these oils out. Are they going to put them out like our licensed producers currently are, in that they are separating or extracting the CBDs and the
because if you could have that concentrated oil, it would stop so many different medications to be being used. I have diabetic friends who are about to have their pancreas taken out when all they needed was that concentrated oil to get their pancreas working again, so that their blood blood sugar levels would be in the proper state,
get back
right?
to balancing.
Exactly.
Our bodies are amazing little machines.
It is, really.
They really are. And they're really good at healing themselves if we provide them with the right tools. All right, let's talk about getting, before we completely run out of time, let's talk a little bit about getting some of this into our food. So now I'm a patient, and I'm, you know, hypothetical here. I'm a patient. It's October 17th. I'm super excited. I got my 4 plants started. I'm going to start growing my own. So I'm looking at using the leaf and the stalk to make teas, and I'm going to, you know, I'm going to do my own thing with my own plants, but right now I don't have that. So I order some herb, the flower from the government. I place my order. It shows up at my door. I don't want to inhale it. I'm not a smoker, and I don't have a vaporizer. I'm just, you know, so I want to ingest.
Your best bet is to ingest. So
okay, so I've got 3 grams of I don't know, help me out here, Northern Pride, which is a 1-to-1 CBD, THC. It's got the same equivalent, 11% THC, 11% CBD. So I know the product that I'm starting with. What can I do? Like, do I just chop that up? I mean,
you could chop it. You could grind it up and chop it up. What you want to do is what we talked about earlier: decarb. Right? You want to activate the THC. So many people have saw the movie where, you know, the guy found a bag of hemp or cannabis and he ate it and he got so buzzed off it. It just doesn't happen that way unless it's heated. Right? It's not activated. Right? So what you'd want to do is you'd want to grind up your 3 grams. You said 3 grams. And you'd want to, decarboxylate it by heating it up to a certain temperature, which is about 100. I usually go around 140. Some people do it less for longer periods of time, right? But I do it for usually 140 for about 45 minutes until the green is kind of a brownish, not burnt, but kind of changed its
color.
Its color, exactly.
Jay,
right?
I hate to cut you off.
That's no problem.
We're out of time. Perhaps I can have you back on in a couple of weeks, and we can advance.
Should I just tell them about your Bud Basics book? Because if they need to know, that's what they'll learn.
It is. It's all in the book, and you can find all kinds more information at www.cannabiscornercafe.ca. Jay, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Green Irene saying be happy, get healthy, and stay strong. Ciao for now.